Hello, welcome back to our last panel of the day, last panel of CDX18. And it's going to be a good one. It's all about the future of the physical car dealership. Now, our panel in a moment is going to be discussing a KPMG survey that this year said that 75% of automotive executives thought that by 2025, half of dealerships would disappear. But is that forecast really that bleak? And what does the future really hold? Well, we've got a panel of experts to shed some light on the situation. So please put your hands together and welcome them to the stage.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, just some introductions first. To my left here, we have John O'Hanlon, previous CEO of Ridgeway Group, now CEO of Waylands Automotive. He set up his own business and is in the process of opening more physical dealerships as we speak. Natasha Patel, Associate Director at KPMG, the company responsible for that research we're going to be talking about, who we're going to be talking to us about that data.
Be nice.
We'll try. And then we have Paul Singleton, who's a director at UK's biggest manufacturer, Ford. He's responsible for dealer operations and has been with the company for more than 20 years. And at the end there, we have John Tordoff, who's the CEO of JCT600, one of the biggest dealer groups in the UK with 50 locations in the north of England. Welcome to the panel. Thank you very much for joining us and giving us up your time. Let's start with you, Natasha. Explain yourself. No, I'm going to be nice. Are dealerships days really numbered?
So I'll start off with two things. The first is to say that in 1960, the S&P 500 companies had an average life of 60 years. Today, they have an average life of 12. There is a lot of change, and it's cutting faster and faster. That's the first point I'll make. The second one I'll make is the research said that auto executive surveys, so the auto industrial executives themselves, felt that dealerships will disappear 30 to 50%. So you can pick a number, 30, 20, 50. I think the message that we're trying to convey here is that change is coming, and we need to be prepared. And we need to think about what are the key trends that are showing that that's going to happen, and what is going to change, and what can you do to future-proof yourself to make sure that you're still around in at least 12 years and hopefully 60 years.
So we've talked a lot over the last couple of days about the change to online car sales. Do you think this is what's going to be responsible for dealerships closing? Is it going to be manufacturers selling direct to the consumer?
Yeah, so I would say there's about 4 key trends that I'm tracking very closely. The first one is alternative drivetrains, electric vehicles specifically, and the impact that they have on dealerships and how dealerships need to change the way that they think about their business models, their operating models in order to deal with the change in stock. The second one would be what we call mobility as a service, which is essentially on-demand mobility services. What that does to personal car ownership, what that does to personal owned cars versus fleet and commercial fleet stock. And the third would be, exactly as you said, the emergence of digitization and an online platform, and what that does to the emergence of more software over hardware and so on and so forth. Those would be 3 trends I would say that you need to be thinking about and the impact that they have.
So, John, I'm going to jump in. Are you worried?
No.
Why not?
Short answer. Well, just to come back on the survey, first and foremost, I would say I agree with, in principle, some of the findings of the survey, and I think we're seeing that already with the rationalisation of networks. I mean, Vauxhall have done it very publicly. Others are doing it a bit more under the radar, but it's inevitable we are going to see fewer dealerships, but they will each cover bigger territories. They will each have more throughput. And I think that is, not only is it inevitable, I think it's probably quite welcome. Secondly, I agree with the trends. That is definitely happening. Different mobility solutions, obviously on the online experience that probably 80-90% of customers are already experiencing, and that's probably going to become 100% in the next 5, 10 years maybe. But thirdly, I don't know who any of the 900 executives are, because I've not...
I don't think anyone will confess, that's the thing.
I don't think exactly, I don't know who these 900 people are, because all the people I've spoken to, they all go, well, nobody asked me.
John, you've just started up a whole new dealership group. You must be pretty confident that there's life in the dealership yet.
Well, sorry, you're drowning out. I thought I heard the sound of reversing very gently there. I take your point, I take KPMG's point round about the trends, and those trends are, inevitable. They are arriving. I think what was frightening and potentially damaging was when the headline of 50% within a timescale of 6 and a bit years, when the level of investment that the trade's got tied up is damaging. And that's, I guess that's where I take issue with it. And there is that little bit of, I don't want to use the term clickbait, but I have. And that, I do take a little bit of issue with that as the headline, because that's what it defaulted to. It always defaults to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, but I appreciate that completely. And at the end of the day, I think people want to put a provocative statement out there, and sometimes that's in our control and sometimes that isn't, but that's what the data said, and we very clearly just articulated what the data said.
Yes, but you didn't have to. You made a choice to do it, and I guess that's where I am. You know, I think I said earlier, I think there is a lot of life in our model as it stands, and there has been a gentle disappearance of motor trade groups, but it's been an evolution. It's not been the revolution that headline suggested.
Paul, are you recommending to your dealerships that they need to kind of prepare for the future? Are you putting anything in place for them?
Well, obviously we talk to them a lot about the trends that are ongoing, and you know, at dealer council level, obviously we have those kind of high-level discussions. I think one really important factor is that not all dealerships or dealership sites are created equal. So we've got everything from, you know, small standalone service points in the Scottish Highlands to all singing, all dancing Ford stores, you know, that are absolutely enormous. We've seen a trend over the last few years where some of the smaller branch points have gone. Some of the smaller retail dealers have just decided the world's caught up with them, and it's not how it was in the 1970s, and, you know, the Cortina's long gone, and kind of, can we stop now, please? But we've also seen a tremendous investment in some of the larger sites. I was in Chesterfield this morning, a magnificent new Ford store, absolutely enormous. And yeah, that's Perry's, a privately owned group, and that's a clear sign of confidence in the future from them. So, you know, I think we have seen a reduction in the number of sites, but to say that, you know, there will be large towns or cities that won't have a major presence in them, I think we're a long way off. There's still a lot of miles to be driven. How they're driven and in what, you know, there is still a need for those vehicles to be distributed, prepared, handed over, serviced, traded in, whatever the business model is. And we can't do all of that from a compound in Dagenham and an office block in Brentwood.
Paul, you have the biggest dealer network in the UK.
Yep.
Do you think that's always going to be the case? Is Ford always going to have 500 plus dealers?
If size of dealer network is relative to your volume, then yes, I'd expect there to. Of course, we do fleet, commercial vehicle, and all that kind of stuff as well. But, you know, we also do a 13% private retail share. So, yeah, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't have. You know, it's always been a strength of ours. We are absolutely not actively looking to downsize it. We're working with dealers. And a great example would be we opened a Ford store with Trust Ford in Wilmslow, and the branch point at Hazel Grove closed down. That was a relatively old site, quite small, a new road was built. They invested in the Ford store, and that's more than covering the volume that was left there. So where it's sensible, where it works for us and customers and dealers, we'll kind of encourage and work with them, but we're not actively out there, you know, recommending that sites are closed just for the sake of it.
John Tordoff, how do you think the physical car dealership is going to change as we go into the future?
I think, like everything, it has to evolve. And by that, I mean, Well, one of the phrases that we use, we have to stay relevant. I mean, that term's often used in an online way, but I think it has to apply in an offline way, in the actual physical dealership way as well. We've done it, we're continually doing it, and I would urge everybody in this room to do the same. But you need to evaluate whether your processes are fit for the 21st century or whether they're fit for 2018. Too many processes that you still see evident today, they were written in the 1970s and the 1960s. And while they still have some part to play in terms of control, they are so far away from being customer-centric now that it's kind of embarrassing. I don't think, if you look at any research from a customer point of view, the thought of buying a new car is, it's akin to going to the dentist. And we have to overcome these barriers by taking a much more customer-centric approach to the way we do business. Because if we don't, we will just kind of commit suicide as an industry, and we'll allow the car wows and the such like of the world just to prosper. Because you know what, if you're sitting in your lounge at night, it suddenly becomes much more appealing to buy a car online through a car wow platform than it does to actually get in your car or pick up a phone and speak to a dealership and kind of be treated like a 1970s customer. So for me, it's a big thing about, obviously the businesses have evolved. I mean, you look at a modern business now compared to what they were 20, 30 years ago, and they are like chalk and cheese. But a lot of the behaviours under that roof are kind of still the same, and that has to change. We've just done a huge piece of research where we've studied all our inquiries over the past 3 years, which has taken some doing. And you look at how the trends have changed, but how some of our working practices haven't. Which days are busier than others, the times of day when the phone rings and when the phone's not ringing, when electronic inquiries are coming in and when they're not. I mean, I would imagine most people in the room, if you analyse your inquiries, you'll all be seeing the phone's ringing less. There's less people walking onto your site, but your electronic inquiries are going through the roof. And if you don't develop systems and processes and create resource to deal with that, you're very quickly going to become non-relevant and you're going to disappear.
Just build on that, on one of our points of view around sort of that future of mobility. So if you think about the customer today, they interact with all the different value chains around the automotive sector individually. They'll go to a dealer, they buy a car, they then sort of either go through the dealer, arrange for the insurance or the financing, or they do that separately, they pay government tax separately, they may go to the workshop separately. All of those value chains interface with the customer. I think fast forward 5-10 years, put a number that sounds reasonable. There will be an aggregator that will sit on top and liaise with the customer in the most efficient way possible, whether that's online, whether it's another shape or form it might take. But that person will then become the person that provides the mobility service to the end consumer. But everything at the back of it has not gone away. It all still exists. Somebody still needs to hold that car. It's a physical asset. Somebody still needs to service it, and somebody still needs to provide all the other things that happen. So all that changes is the format that you interact with the customer. There's either an aggregator that's doing the B2C role, and then you've then taken the role of the B2B, where you're essentially plugging in the exact same physical services into another business. But that demand doesn't go away. And I suppose that is the sort of change that we're seeing happening in the value chains and in the way that the service would be provided. Is it will essentially change who you're providing that service to, but it doesn't make the service go away.
John, are your new dealerships under your new brand any different to the ones that you set up at Ridgeway?
I don't think the fundamentals are different. What we had eventually got to was a winning formula, and what we've done is we've gently recognised some of the changes over the last 2 to 3 years, but the fundamental of how we're approaching is the same. you know, our biggest protection for a physical dealership is an experience. If you can have the same experience at home that you can do in a dealership, why would you go to the dealership? And that's everything from how you can interact with the vehicles, to the best advice, to how it feels when you walk in. It's still got to be better than what you can do at home, and I think we can still do that. And that's why, you know, I think my little mantra is the way we're approaching it still has some life. Now, there will be changes. There's still not been that disruptor. I mean, even our friends over here are still working with the backing of franchise dealerships. It's still given the comfort of a franchise dealer will be there. You're just getting a visibility of the best price available. It's giving you comfort round about that piece. And that's why, looking ahead, I'm still waiting to see what that change is going to be. I haven't seen it yet.
Paul, how's the Ford dealership changing? You've talked a little bit about Ford stores, but you also in your network have very small family-run business operations. How are those physical sites changing? What does Ford want to do to push things forward?
I think in terms of the balance between groups and family dealerships, first of all, we have seen a trend in the last few years of the groups getting a little bit bigger. We've seen several of our more traditional family dealerships kind of be absorbed. I think they've you know, perhaps decided to leave the industry at this point where they can't sustain the investment themselves, or a dealer group has seen that actually with that site or those couple of sites, there's some good economies of scale, some sort of further costs can be taken out. In terms of the physical space on site, clearly as we develop our hybrid electric vehicle range, things like charging infrastructure are going to be absolutely more important. As the service business develops, then you know, there'll be different kinds of activities there. I mean, we're planning a dealership down in the southwest where they are specifically facilitating a part of their service department to do sort of quick two-technician type services. So they're building it from scratch, and they're configuring that particular part of the business, you know, to satisfy the need for speed, if you like, from today's customer. And they reckon they'll be able to do a 45-minute, you know, standard service by setting that. So I think that's quite a good example of, you know, more evolution than revolution. I know it's a cliche, but you know, there's still 30 million existing vehicles out there on the road. Anybody who suddenly, you know, installs 10 electric charging points and does all sorts of radically different things, a lot of existing customers. There's a massive car park out there already.
What other problems does a change in powertrain cause for car dealerships? Is there anything that you are anticipating in the next 5 years you'll have to bring in?
I think charging points is actually a real practical issue that a lot of dealerships will face, where we do only have so much power, and especially if you're in part of a development, there's only so much power to go around. That is a real point they've got to worry about. There'll be a lot more investment. We'll need new tools. We'll need lots more training for those guys, as it's not just having a senior tech. More of your technicians will need to be qualified to actually work on or around different drivetrains. So, you know, at the end of the day, as the cars are going to be propelled, we will sell what our manufacturer partners send us. So I think it's just about the realization that there will be certain tweaks to what goes on, but it feels more after sales rather than sales at the moment.
I would say there's a sales element as well, because I think, again, an EV feels very different from a traditional combustion engine. And you've got to sell that entire experience of driving an electric vehicle, the fact the torque is there, the fact that you have that acceleration, the fact that it is so quiet. These are the selling points. I mean, a lot of people say that the whole point of buying an EV was so they can really hear their music because there's no hum. And I completely appreciate a petrol head would that's the disadvantage of an EV. But your sales points of why people enjoy that experience of an electric vehicle are actually quite different. And I think you will have to think about the sales elements as well in a dealership when you're starting to push your electric vehicle stock. And absolutely, I think the after-sales service elements are spot on. You're going to have less moving parts, actually, in an electric vehicle, which means that the amount of service and SMR that's going to come back to the dealerships is going to be much lesser. And that could potentially impact a few revenue streams as well. And you're going to need a different capability set, absolutely. You're going to need electrical technicians, all will need to be upskilled, or you need to get them. And they need to be coming through as well in terms of that electrical background through the universities and everything as well. So that is another big aspect in terms of dealing with a different drivetrain. And then the supporting infrastructure is an obvious one, absolutely. But that is probably one for the wider mobility ecosystem to look at. So the energy industry, the automakers, the manufacturers, the actual hardware manufacturers, ABB, Siemens, everybody needs to be fixing that particular problem. That's not a dealership problem. That's not a Ford problem.
No, but it's a fairly long-term investment for some dealers and dealer groups, though. So our dealer accounts are already asking us, okay, so do you think we're going to be starting to do electric from next year, because we're starting already to go into the budgeting season, and they're looking for guidance
100%.
from us on that already. And traditionally, we're not brilliant as an industry at looking beyond the month, the quarter, if we're lucky, the year.
So what are you telling them? Should they be investing?
We'll tell them when they need to be investing as much as they need to invest at the appropriate time.
Okay.
The problem is, if you invest too early, you're going to have to replace it again in probably about 12 months' time, because technology is changing, and it's just changing so fast that whatever you install today will probably be out of date by next year.
Or will it be hydrogen, or will it be something else?
John, are you worried about the manufacturers that are moving to online car sales? And are you preparing as a dealership group for online car sales yourself?
Well, to answer your second point of the question first, yes, we are. We're working behind the scenes now to create a fully online solution. Someone can buy a car from our website without actually visiting us. And we hope to have that fully integrated by the end of the year. I think it will be very, very small numbers to begin with, but it will grow. But again, as an industry, we don't really help ourselves, because none of the systems work as you would want them to work. The integration is a nightmare. Our sales execs work on a real-time basis, but our systems are always 12, 24 hours lagging behind, and you always run the risk that you can end up selling the same car twice, which is a disaster from a customer relationship point of view. So I think technology needs to catch up, and I don't think the technology is quite there just yet, but it'll get there. Moving on to the first part of your question, I think it's inevitable that some manufacturers will move towards some kind of agency agreement or such like. I think it's inevitable. As and when that happens, obviously you pay your money, you take your choice as to what you want to do with it. No one's holding a gun to your head. You can say, that's not for me, thanks, I'm checking out, or you can carry on regardless. I think it will be evolution, not revolution. I think manufacturers have tried to do things like this before and failed miserably. It's not entirely beyond the realms of possibility that they'll fail again. I wish manufacturers would manufacture cars, OEMs would distribute them, and leave the retailers to retail in them, because I think that kind of food chain works. I can't manufacture cars and they can't retail them, but for some reason that everyone just seems to be trying to cut out the middleman here.
But quite a few of them are trying.
Quite a few have tried in the past and failed. As I say, don't be surprised if a few more have a go and fail again. I think there will always be a role for the dealer in the supply chain. And it'll be down to the OEMs to make sure, if they do move to some kind of agency agreement or whatever, that it still makes financial sense for people such as myself and John to have tens of millions of pounds tied up in these businesses to get the necessary return at the bottom, out of the bottom.
John, are you prepared to sell cars online or preparing for it?
That was very kind of you to say tens of millions of pounds. Well, no, I'm mainly working on a group website at the moment, and hopefully news to follow of that next month. This is still very early days for Waylands. You know, we've only actually had the doors open 6 months. Do I appreciate the fact that customers will want to buy online? Yes. Should we be facilitating that? Yes. I've always been a critic of some of our manufacturers around about digital. It's an area that they've not exploited or not moved on quickly enough, and dealers so often have led the way. What would be fascinating is to see which manufacturer can get that the system right, that not only sells the car in the way the customer wants, but also fully involves a dealer. And that's the part where you look at some of the work that JLR are doing around about it. They're still trying to incorporate and keep the position of the dealer throughout the process. As soon as you go direct, it undermines the whole of your network, and that just not palatable for any network at the moment.
Natasha,
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, you've got a brand like Tesla over there that took 300,000 orders for its new Model 3 online, $1,000 a time. Surely that proves people are ready to buy online and there's a market for it.
100%. So I was going to say something related to that. So yes, online dealerships in physical form, dealerships of any form will exist. Evolution, not revolution, I accept that as well. But here's another thought. The number of people applying for a license, young people applying for a license, has dropped drastically in the tens of percents. The statistic doesn't come to mind immediately, not in the 1 or 2%, but in the 10s, 20s, 30s of percents. You have a growing generation that doesn't actually want to drive a car, but wants that mobility to be on demand. And that was the underlying factor that drove to that piece of statistic that started this conversation in the first place, which is, does the upcoming generation even want to own a vehicle? And then if they don't, what does that mean with the dealerships? Which is why I said that if eventually you become a user of on-demand mobility, the car is still needed, but you're not selling it to the customer, you're selling it to a fleet. And you're servicing that fleet. So actually, I think the opportunity for dealerships doesn't go away. It just changes its shape and its form in terms of how you make your money and who you service at the end of it, and whether that opportunity exists for end-to-end fleet management, whether that is indeed physical, online, and what shape and form that takes completely depends on that piece of the market that you're going to capture. But it's going to be a smaller pie. That's personally what I believe, and I know that that's what the point of view of the firm is as well. But the opportunity exists to make more out of that pie if you're able to accept some of the changes that are coming and are able to make those moves faster than anybody else might in the system. And I think Tesla has I think, proved itself as one of those people that has captured the huge chunk of that electric vehicle market, being one of the first movers there. It's come at a cost, don't get me wrong. They're not a profit-making company, some would say. But that's sort of the pros and the cons, as is with any sort of innovative business and how that goes forward. So that's just some food for thought.
And Paul, what are Ford's thoughts when it comes to online selling? Are you going to sell direct to the consumer?
Well, if you make your way over to the Arndale Centre in Manchester, you'll see in the next store there a placard that says, very exciting news. And in a couple of months' time, we'll be opening essentially a full showroom in the next store. And is this part of a great far-reaching strategy that we know the answer for 20 years' time? Of course it's not. We're experimenting, we're trying stuff out. You'll be able to buy the vehicle online in the store. You'll be able to start your journey in store and carry it on when you get home. And in time, the online platform will be there for you, even if you haven't been into the next store. However, our dealer council, we took them there in April, and they were actually very excited by it. Partly because, or in the main, because of the amount of brand presence it actually gives us, the amount of footfall and eye contact that we get with the brand. It's one of the very biggest necks in the country. The amount of footfall number of people going through there is fantastic, and we all know that there are fewer visits per sale to showrooms, to physical car showrooms. So as a way of getting the vehicle in front of the customer in a bit of a more structured way with a bit more of an end game than, car in the shopping centre for the weekend kind of thing, we're trying it. In terms of where it fits in with the dealer, we sell getting on for 200,000 vehicles a year to private individuals. Again, there's no way that we can PDI all of those in Dagenham and deliver them one by one to those customers if everything went online. I know it's an extreme position, but if you were inventing a structure to deal with that, you'd have a number of dealerships in major towns and cities where you'd send the vehicles to, they'd prep them and hand them over with expertise. Kind of sounds a bit like a well-run dealer network. So, I don't think there's anything to fear, even if there is a mass move online. We will pay an appropriate amount for a negotiated amount for the handover and the PDI, and the dealer's costs and maybe some of their facilities will be adjusted accordingly if it really does take off.
So that's a Ford-owned site that's going to be facilitated those cars through the dealership network?
Yeah.
Yep.
But isn't that what NSO should be doing? That is almost what you've described as a form of marketing, and actually build demand and desire for the product. You just happen to be doing it in a big shopping centre on a more permanent basis.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is that we don't know what we'll learn. We may learn some really great stuff about the types of products that kind of work when you put them in front of a stream of people every day. And there might be, micro rollouts in partnership with dealers using the learning or anything. It certainly doesn't mean that within 12 months in every next store in the land there'll be 3 or 4 Fiestas. That absolutely isn't going to happen. But we'll learn from it, we'll experiment, and whatever we do will be for the customer's benefit, our benefit, and the dealer network's benefit in equal measures.
Does anyone in the audience have a question?
Jumping off the stage a bit.
John, question for you really. I do agree with a lot of what you're actually saying about the dealership. But without a shadow of a doubt, it plays a role in the future for lots and lots of different reasons, albeit it's got to evolve. But I don't think the dealership model is broken. I think the sales model is broken in terms of how cars are sold. I don't see why I should walk into any dealership, and because of my experience of working in automotive retail all my life, get a better deal than my Auntie Marie, who's 70 years old, who might walk in to the same dealership and get a completely different deal because she's naive. And in terms of millennials, they won't accept that. They probably won't even accept coming to the dealership to drive the car. I've just taken my son to look at cars. He can't believe we're spending all day traipsing around dealerships. He's like, well, Dad, can't they bring the cars to us? Surely that's what we do here. So, I actually think that the actual sales model is broken, and I think that's why dealers get a bad name. And as you quite rightly pointed out early on, sorry, this is such a long-winded question. Everyone who knows me knows I'm like that. But the lack of inquiries that are being unfulfilled in the right amount of time is still, as when I was selling cars 15, 20 years ago, is just completely unacceptable in the digital world. So do you think the sales model's broken, and does that not need to evolve and evolve quickly?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I don't think the dealership model's broken at all. And there's been all sorts of statistics sort of broadcast from this stage and online over the last 48 hours or so. The role of the dealership still plays a really, really important part in the purchase for the vast majority of customers. But it's like I said before, it's the whole process is akin to a visit to the dentist. Someone described it as the sales process. It's akin to spending an hour in an MRI scanner. And anybody who spent an hour in an MRI scanner will know what I mean. It's not a pleasant experience, and I think that's because the sales process, going back 20, 30, 40 years, it was all designed around the needs of management and not around the needs of the customer. And that has to kind of flip on its head a little bit now, because the two aren't the two can't meet, because otherwise all you're doing is you're driving people online who will, it's so much easier just to leave a credit card number online and someone will knock on your door 48 hours later with the keys and go, there you go. The sales process has to change. It has to become much, as John said, much more experiential. We have to ask, customers are entering the sales process at so many different levels now. I mean, a good friend of mine embarrassingly walked into one of our dealerships, and he was telling me only like 3 months ago, and he kind of walked in with, I'm here to buy a car, but I don't know what I want. And he said the guys just stood and looked at me as if to say, well, if you don't know what you want, how are we supposed to know what you want? Because these days, people are coming in and going, I want that one. Because I've seen it online, I've seen it here, I've seen it there. And as I said, it needs to change, and we need to put the customer at the centre of the sales process. But again, all the systems that we have need to be customer-centric as well. And I do think a lot of our, certainly inquiry management systems, they're all based around the needs of management and not necessarily around what's best for the customer. The customer, we get people saying, I want to buy this one. And we get people who are just inquiring because they're really, really early stages, and they're just fact-finding. You give an early fact-finding kind of lead to your average salesman, and his response is, "Well, come in on Saturday." Wrong answer. You get other customers who are saying, "I've seen this car. I think I want to buy it." Great. We'll bring the car out to you if it helps. We're trialing Test Drive at Home at the moment on our website, and the results are frighteningly good. Where people say, "Well, you just bring it to my house?" Yeah. Wow. We're selling cars to customers who don't actually visit the dealership. We take the car to the house, they test drive it, they like it. The deal's transacted in the front living room. And it's done and dusted. We take it back, prep it, give it a bit of a prep and a valet and whatever, and it's the job done. And that's why the whole sales process needs to evolve, but with the customer in the centre rather than sales management in the centre. All right, and we all live and work in the most regulated environment that we've ever worked in. And we have this phrase called rigid flexibility, and there needs to be certain hurdles that you have to go through to make sure you maintain the rigidity. But beyond all that, it's all at the customer's pace, on the customer's terms, and it has to be.
Just anecdotally, Tesla lets you keep the car for the weekend before you choose to buy it.
I wish they'd done that for us. It took us quite a long time to get that one. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed to our panel. Thanks for everybody for coming along to CDX18. We hope to see you next year. Please put your hands together for our fantastic panelists.
Thank you, guys.